yet another episode of Ball with Y'all. Welcome to the midweek edition of our show. Of course, at this point, we only have one show per week, but still the midweek edition nonetheless, the May 11th edition. We are flying through the month of May. We only have 2 more episodes after this until we wrap up season 2. So we're so glad that you chose to join us, however you chose to join us, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, or Breaker, or of course, YouTube at BWY Productions. However you chose to join us, I so very much appreciate it, and I hope you're ready for yet another full show. Like I always say, we have a full show, and yes, we do have a full show for you today. We were coming off of a jam-packed weekend in the sports world with the Kentucky Derby, with the race at Darlington, with the F1 race down here in Miami, with some wild playoff games in the NBA and in the NHL. A lot to unpack. So before I get too far down the rabbit hole here, let's get into story number 1. On Sunday, we had a lot of things to do, right? We had Mother's Day, right? Which hopefully you had the opportunity to celebrate your mom and show her how much she means to you. And some other things, of course, as well, beyond just the sports world. And in fact, you may have heard it a little bit last week, but I was a little under the weather last week. And I didn't quite know why at the time. But then I was out of the office supporting some event for my company, right? And I come back, I left Tuesday, come back on Wednesday, right? And I come to find out that my whole department has come across this disease that many of you are probably familiar with. It's called coronavirus. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool, right? But I was like, I'm not going to get the coronavirus. It's not going to happen. And so then fast forward Wednesday to Thursday, I come home that day and I test, and I was like, hey, look at that. I have the coronavirus. So suffice to say, I really enjoyed having a lot to do over the past few days as far as sports go, as far as all the different playoff games, the Derby, F1 race, and of course, wrapping up with our NASCAR race on Sunday. And that's where I'll start today, that NASCAR race. It was full, to say the least, a fun race that Darlington treated us to, but it did not come without its sacrifices, if you will, where we lost a number of top drivers for one reason or another throughout that race and throughout that weekend, of course. Before we even got to the race itself, Chase Elliott, he ate the wall in practice twice and ended up having to go back to his backup car, which he did pretty well with nonetheless. Kevin Harvick spun in practice as well. I believe Denny Hamlin even had some trouble as well. So some of these more established guys struggled a lot in the race or in the practice session on, I guess that was Saturday. Then getting into Sunday, we saw Kyle Larson. He spun, and then he ultimately couldn't get his car started back, I believe. He was done for the day. Ross Chastain, off of a restart, just ate a hard left into the wall. Brad Keselowski, he was in a wreck with Kyle Busch. He was done, as was Busch. Busch was done, which is a beautiful sight to see for those of you, if you're like me, who just does not like Kyle Busch whatsoever. But nonetheless, a tough moment there for him. And then basically every other Toyota on the field, in addition to Kyle Busch, with Kurt Busch and Bubba Wallace and Truex Jr. and Hamlin, they were all involved in this massive wreck where you end up seeing Truex get pushed 3 wide. He's in the center, and then he kind of gets loose and collects just about everybody, right? And suffice to say, it was not without its faults. It was not without taking out half the field, to the point where you see Justin Haley, which, I mean, I know who Justin Haley is. You probably do too, but not exactly the world's most established driver. He ends up finishing, I believe, 3rd, right? It was a war of attrition, to say the least. It kind of reminded you of a Talladega or a Daytona, where these guys are just fighting to stay alive, because if you can get through all the wrecks at Daytona or Talladega, you'll likely have a strong finish, and that's exactly what happened this past Sunday. If you can get through all the chaos of all these other drivers wrecking for one reason or another, right? Whether that was Brad Keselowski getting loose, or Kyle Larson blowing a tire, or Truex getting loose in center and collecting everybody. If you can get through all that, you're probably going to have a good finish. And that's a little bit of what we saw on Sunday. Another thing that I took away from this, about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, I said that we would have more than 16 drivers, right? And that would win a race this year. And of course, the significance there is if you win a playoff race, or if you win a race, rather, the common thought process is that you make the playoffs, right? Because that is kind of it's not an automatic qualifier, but it's one of the things, right? So the first thing they do is they collect, okay, all the people who have won this year, cool. And if you have more wins, you're at the top, and so on. So that's great and all, right? But what happens when you get to number 17? Well, then, of course, number 17, if you have 17 guys who win a race in the year, 17's on the outside looking in, right? And we talked about how Brad Keselowski could be in that boat, a number of other guys. Well, after just 12 races, so a little over a quarter way done with the season here, we already have 10 different winners. And of course, the only two repeat winners have been Ross Chastain and William Byron. So it doesn't seem all that unlikely that we'll get six more guys win. And then who's to say we won't get a seventh or an eighth or a ninth or 10th, right? Just some guys who haven't won yet that you'd figure would that should get to victory lane here in the near future. Martin Truex Jr., right? We've talked about it before. He's been close. He'll do it at some point. I believe he had 3 or 4 wins last year. He'll get to victory lane. Another guy who had multiple wins last year, Ryan Blaney. I believe he's second or third right now for points. He'll get up there. Tyler Reddick, we've talked about that one before as well. He is super fast. He's going to get his way up there, and he should have won, honestly, at Bristol 3 weeks ago for Easter. Yeah. And then Chase Briscoe got into his rear end and pushed him up the wall. You're not going to see that too regularly. So he will get there, and he'll find himself a really good opportunity to get that first win at the cup level. We talked about it before, Kevin Harvick. I don't know where he's been, right? Well, I didn't know where he'd been. And then, of course, this past Sunday, he finished 4th, which is all power to him. I'm glad that you showed up, Kevin, because I have been looking for you for quite some time. Brad Keselowski, we talked about that one as well. He needs to win. Not just once, but maybe twice, right? And perhaps one of his best opportunities will come at, some of these tracks that have a little bit more uncertainty. You would have figured that one of his best opportunities would have been at Talladega 2 weeks ago, and he squandered that one. And then, speaking of Talladega, a guy who was leading at the end of the second to last lap, Eric Jones. You'd figure he might find his way to victory lane as well. He's done pretty well. And so if I was to take all those guys, that's 16 different winners. And then who's to say that Christopher Bell doesn't find his way to victory lane, or Austin Dillon, or Kurt Busch, Eric Almirola, and so on. And then all of a sudden, we are well past 16 different winners this year. And then the playoff picture gets a lot muddier and muddier. So it seems safe to say we are definitely going to reach 16 winners and maybe surpass it as well. As far as the ending of the race on Sunday, I know there was a lot of frustration in one camp and joy in the other camp. Of course, I'm talking about when William Byron got rear-ended, if you will, by Joey Logano. And of course, Logano's point was, I guess, on a restart, Byron kind of pushed him into the wall. So then he chose to retaliate in some way, if you will, by getting into the back of William Byron. But the issue was William Byron ended up going into the wall and ended up losing a top 10 spot. I think he finished 13th, right? So William Byron's already annoyed, and it's this long back and forth, right? But in any case of who was upset and who felt they were justified or whatever else, it seems to me that Joey Logano was the justified one here, right? I know that he probably could have gotten around William Byron a little bit better than he did. He probably didn't even have to touch him, right? Because he was a lot faster there toward the last few laps. He probably could have gotten around him. Instead, he chose to go through him. And also, keep in mind that William Byron did not need that win on Sunday. He already has 2 wins to his name this year. He did not need to win that race. So you have to get over yourself, buddy. You already have 2 wins to your name. You're already firmly in the playoffs. It does not matter what happens from here. You're going to make the playoff. You're in a really great position right now. In fact, you are in somewhat of a great position for the points race right now. If Chase Elliott falls off a little bit, you can just relax a little bit, right? And here's the thing. I like William Byron, right? He's probably my second or third favorite driver. But to go out there and call Joey Logano a moron for running for a win, when I just talked to you about how important those wins are, I don't blame him, right? In fact, I honestly support what Joey Logano did. And here's the funny thing about it. I obviously wasn't watching it when Dale Earnhardt was running these races, senior. But apparently he would do these exact same things and nobody complained, right? So interesting double standard there. If we're going to treat Joey Logano differently than we treated Dale Earnhardt 25 years ago. Now, again, I know Joey Logano is not Dale Earnhardt, but in the sense of you run the race the way you're going to run it because you have to win a race, I understand it. And honestly, I understand Joey doing it because keep in mind, he hadn't won a race since Bristol on dirt in, I guess it was spring of 21. It'd been like 40 races or something ridiculous like that. And you never know when your next shot is going to be either. Also, keep in mind his two teammates, Austin Cindric, won the first race of the year, and Ryan Blaney is currently in contention for the points lead as well. So you'd have to say that maybe Logano was going to be the third best driver out there. And I know he won for his team. I know he won the preseason race at the Coliseum, but obviously that didn't count. And at this point, I think all of us have kind of discounted that race as something that didn't really matter a whole lot. And here we are where it matters most, and he ran for it, and he did what he needed to do. So all credit to him, in my opinion. I think Byron kind of needs to get over himself just a tad, right? I get it. I understand your frustration, but you already have 2 wins. So just move on, right? You'll probably get some more opportunities here in the coming weeks. Speaking of coming weeks, this week we're going to Kansas, right? I wouldn't say it's going to be nearly as fun as some of the races we've had as of late, but hopefully I am proven wrong. As far as guys that I would like to look out for, of course, Kevin Harvick, his average finish here in 32 career races is 9th, and he's won here 3 different times. Chase Elliott, his average finish is 10th in 12 races, and he's won 1 time at this track. Brad Keselowski, his average finish is 11th with 2 wins in 24 races. But of the top 10 active drivers at this track, this was a pretty interesting stat that I saw. Only 3 of them have an average run of well, I guess they were all pretty high as far as average run, but only 3 of those with top 10 average finishes have run 15 or fewer races at Kansas, right? I just mentioned guys like Keselowski and Harvick and so on. They've obviously run a lot of times at this track, but guys who have not run nearly as many races, but have still done pretty well here, right? I mentioned Chase Elliott. I didn't mention, but Kyle Larson. Of course, we know Kyle Larson does well just about everywhere. His average finish is 15th here. He's run, I think, about 12 or 13 races at this track, including also one more guy. Our winner, my pick to win this week's race, Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick in 5 career races, just 5, right? So a small sample size, but 5 career races. He's recorded 2 top 10s and has a best finish of 7th. And we know he's been fast. I talked about him being due for a win here shortly. I think he could do it here. I think Chevy gets back to their winning ways. I think he finds his way to victory lane this week. I will take Tyler Reddick at Kansas. On to story number 2. Now, there are only a few things more American than the Kentucky Derby, right? Hot dogs, fireworks, Michael Phelps, capitalism, and just to name a few. And I love America, right? So I love things that remind me of the American way. And so then when I wake up Saturday morning and I see on the news like Kentucky Derby today at 6:57, it's like, man, that is America. That is America. I love it, right? I love the Derby. Well, I sort of love the Derby. I don't love how it takes a whole day for a 4-minute thing, right? Like I get like a lot of build up for a 4-hour game, but it's a lot of build up for just the horses to run a little bit, right? But that's another story for another day. But generally speaking, I love the Derby. For those 4 minutes where they are running, it's incredible, right? It's exhilarating. It's so emotional where it brings grown men to tears. Not me, but some grown men to tears. That's why it's such a great moment, right? And I was supporting. I think it was Messier. I don't really know if that's a proper way to say it, but I was supporting the horse named Messier. He didn't win, but he had a good run, right? So that was cool. I was fine with it. But instead, out of nowhere, this race called Rich Strike stormed through the field and won as an 80-1 underdog. And the really cool thing about it was before the final turn, Final Strike was running 17th. And by the end, of course, he was ahead of every single horse in that race. It was an incredible finish. It was really cool to see because everyone loves an underdog, right? And that actually prompted a pretty interesting tweet and interaction from one of our favorite SEC coaches after the race. I learned after this race on Saturday that Mike Leach of Mississippi State Bulldogs, too loves an underdog. After the Derby, he tweeted out the following: "That horse winning the Kentucky Derby is a good example of why an expanded college football playoff is needed. That horse had not won all the races leading up to, of course, the Derby, but it got its chance, and that's what happened." So here's what Mike Leach is saying. He's saying that this horse that up until the final turn, that was running 17th at that point in time, that it won the race. That's an indicator that any other team out there who's running 17th, if you will, in the college football playoff rankings, maybe they're not that good most of the season, but they win a game that puts them in position to be 17th right around Thanksgiving. Well, they deserve to play for a championship, right? Mm, I don't know. That's a really direct tie, right? And of course, the funny thing about this is, I feel once again I'm talking about the playoff expansion. It's a topic that just keeps on giving, right? It just never stops, and we're never going to find any sort of resolution the way that things are going lately. I saw a quote from Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, actually earlier today, where he said, "Honestly, at 4, we're fine. The SEC's fine. We'll clean up, right? We're good. We're good here, right? You can keep it 4, right? We don't have to expand." And again, keep in mind, I've discussed it. I'm okay with expansion, right? Obviously, it benefits my team if we don't expand because my team's done very well in the 4-team playoff. They did very well in the BCS too. So I don't really have a dog. Well, I do have a dog in the fight, but I don't really care. I support expansion if we want to do it. But before I go too far here, first thing, it's important to remember that Mike Leach is very rarely serious, right? But I think he's being serious here. And because I think he's being serious here, I think it's my job to tell you that he's incredibly wrong. See, Rich Stroke, was his name? Rich Strike, sorry. Him winning on Saturday was a fluke at best. He did not deserve to win the race. It's like if the 2013 Miami Heat were playing the Charlotte Bobcats. Yes, the Bobcats before they became the Hornets, which throwback. Again, I've talked about it before, how I was really familiar with the NBA back in like the early 2010s. Great example there. If they were playing the Charlotte Bobcats and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, which I believe is their starting small forward at the time, he hits a half-court shot and somehow the Heat in the first round of the playoffs get eliminated because of that one shot. Well, no, that's why the NBA has series in place and things to stop these fluke situations from repeating themselves, right? And that's why I think the beauty of the NBA, the NHL, those leagues that have series, the MLB, so that you'll have the series where there's parity, that you'll see some upsets, right? But you won't see fluke situations all the time, and that makes it even more important that you have the teams that deserve to be up there, that they're there, right? And I look at like the NFL, right? In those leagues, in those games, they have one game, and they don't have a whole series, right? It would be ridiculous to have a full series of football games. You have one game, you win, and you move on. That's it. Like I said, that even makes it more important that you have the teams that deserve to be there in those positions. Last year, we knew that Alabama and Georgia deserved to be in the playoff. But what if Georgia had played a hot Bailey Zappi-led Western Kentucky team and in the first round of the playoff lost, and then Georgia never got to see their championship dreams realized? Well, I think you would say, just like I would, that would be ridiculous, right? Laughable. But that's kind of what is happening here with Rich Strike. And that's kind of what Mike Leach is implying, that we need to open up Pandora's box, because if you just happen to get hot at the right time, you deserve to be there. I don't know if that's the case. I don't think so, because I watched Bailey Zappi struggle against Appalachian State down here in the Boca Raton Bowl, but he could have had the chance to beat Georgia. And then if he did, then Western Kentucky, they deserve to be there, right? No. And in football, you need the most deserving teams. It can't be some invitational. Otherwise, you end up with results like this exact situation that aren't really representative of the quality of the talent on display, right? There were so many horses that deserved to win that race on Saturday. and Rich Strike did it. And honestly, most of us don't really care. We think it's a cool story because we don't deal with horses a whole lot, right? We watched 3 races. Well, most of us. We watched the Kentucky Derby. We watched, I might get these out of order. We watched the Preakness Stakes and we watched the Belmont Stakes. And that's it. Then we move on and we do it again a year later. So most of us don't really care so much. And again, I don't want to hear anything about like St. Peter's and all that kind of stuff. I think we both would agree that March Madness is an entirely different animal, right? So I don't, those runs are different, entirely different in this conversation. I don't think they prove anything. And like I mentioned, I think there are a number of reasons that you can point out to expand the playoff. And like I said, I support expansion. If you want to do it, feel free. Go ahead. Fine. Right. I guarantee you the teams that deserve to be there anyway will win anyway. I guarantee you, if we had 16 teams this year, Alabama majority would still have played for the national championship in Indianapolis. Guarantee it. And did not matter how many teams were in the playoff. This year we just had 4, but it does not really matter when you have the teams that deserve to be there. But using this race, for Mike Leach to use this race as, and this horse for that matter, as the foundation of some argument that tries to point out that every team deserves a chance, right? It's like this participation trophy mindset. It's a losing battle. So if I'm Mike Leach and I'm sitting here considering what to talk about next, I'd shut my mouth a little bit and I'd just focus on trying to win my division, because suffice to say, that'll be a struggle enough before he even gets considered for the college football playoff. On to story number 3. Speaking of playoffs, we are in perhaps my favorite time of the year. And I say that knowing that it's we're in the middle of baseball season. I don't like baseball season. I don't like baseball, honestly. I mean, baseball's fine, but I can't sit there and watch a total of 27 minutes of gameplay sandwiched between 3 hours of stalling and commercials. I can't do it. It's not because it's the football offseason. In fact, I don't like the football offseason. As the sign might suggest, I'm kind of bored right now, right? Kind of waiting for September, right? It's not that. But still, I really enjoy this time of year. I enjoy it because of the Stanley Cup and the NHL playoffs. The NHL playoffs, they are unparalleled, in my opinion. There's so much excitement. There's so much parity. There's so much uncertainty. I say that because I just talked about how great the series model is. How usually you won't have a team that just has no business being there doing much against a 1 seed, right? But in the NHL, you see these upsets all the time. In fact, I believe it was the Los Angeles Kings in the mid-2010s. They were an 8 seed that went on to win the World Cup, the Stanley Cup Finals, right? In fact, there are numerous series right now at the time of recording where the East number 1 seed, which is in the form of the Florida Panthers, they are losing to the 8 seed right now, the Washington Capitals, 2-1 in that series. The East number 2 seed, the Carolina Hurricanes, they are currently tied with the number 7 seed, Boston Bruins. And the West number 2 seed is the Colorado Avalanche. And they're losing to the 7 seed out in the western half of things 2-1. So it seems pretty clear that parity is available in the NHL landscape when it comes to their playoffs. And that's something you don't see anywhere else. Going back to what Mike Leach was talking about with this idea of giving everyone a chance, in the NHL of all places, that's the only place where it kind of makes sense, because you see these results where these 8 seeds and these 7 seeds do well. And that's usually because these teams are a lot closer in the level of talent and their ability that you don't really see a whole lot at the college football level, right? You don't really see a whole lot at the Major League Baseball level. The amount of parity that shows up in the NHL playoffs is simply unmatched. And honestly, it's why I don't even watch the regular season a whole lot. I'll catch a game here or there, right? It's usually on Sundays on NBC or something like that. I know this year ESPN arranged a deal with the NHL, so that's been fun to catch a couple games here and there. But generally speaking, I don't even watch regular season hockey, because why would you? When the pressure gets ratcheted up in the playoffs, that the level of intensity gets ratcheted up in the playoffs, that the mistakes, they get magnified in the playoffs. And it's something that you see year in and year out. I'm a Penguins fan, full disclosure, right? Literally at the time of recording right now, my Penguins are leading 7-2 over the Rangers. And I love to see that because they're about to take a 3-1 lead. I'm really happy about that. Just want to say that. But I'm a Penguins fan, right? And I have seen my Penguins come out on the better side of that parity and on the worst side of that parity. In fact, in 2020, in the middle of the COVID year, they went to a bubble in somewhere in Canada. I would say Montreal or Toronto, somewhere in there. Maybe it was Buffalo. That's not Canada, but somewhere up in that region of the world. All the teams went to this area, right? Much like the NBA, how they went to Orlando and hung out at Disney. The same thing happened with the NHL. They went to a bubble to finish off their season. And the Penguins, going into that series, were the number 5 seed. And I don't recall why they did this, but the Penguins were the 5 seeds. They were the best seed that played in the first round. The first 4 seeds did not play in the first round. So the 5 seed played the 12 seed, and the 6 seed played the 11 seed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Much like we see in March Madness and so on. But notwithstanding, the Penguins played the Montreal Canadiens, the 12 seed, the worst team in the East, and lost. The 5 seed, the best team that played in the first round from the eastern half of the NHL, lost to the worst team that made the playoffs. And it wasn't because it was a fluke. No, Montreal was a good team. It goes back to the parity that's on display in the NHL, particularly because that's something you don't see anywhere else. You would not see the Canadians, the equivalent of the Canadians, go out there and do nearly as well as they did in the NHL, right? I look at, for example, if I was a Boston Celtics fan and I saw that I drew the Brooklyn Nets this year, I'm like, oh boy, got to deal with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, right? And if he shows up, Ben Simmons and all these other boys that I've talked about before, ad nauseum, Patrick Mills, right? LaMarcus Aldridge, a stacked roster. I'm a little concerned, just a little bit, right? And they handle them with ease. So it goes to show you the level of parity you think you have in the NBA is not exactly equivalent to what you see in the NHL. And aside from the parity side of things, I love the overtime rules in the NHL. I guess it's basically what you see in the NFL, but not really. Actually, not at all, because we just had reform on the NFL playoff rules. But last week, I mentioned I was under the weather. So on Tuesday, I got back to my hotel, and I wasn't feeling well, so I went to bed at like 9 o'clock, right? And I look up and I see the Penguins were playing game 1 against the Rangers, and they were tied in the early part of the third quarter. And I was like, well, I don't really know that I want to stay here for this, so I'll go to bed. I wake up 2 hours later. The Penguins were still playing against the Rangers. They were in triple overtime. An incredible way to begin the series, and they've had so much scoring ever since. It's been a wild series. And honestly, the number of times I've seen a 2 or 3 overtime game in the NHL playoffs, I feel like it happens pretty regularly. And it's pretty exciting. Again, it goes back to the pressure that is associated with these moments. You don't get that level of excitement anywhere else. The NBA playoffs is not nearly as exciting. The NFL playoffs are not nearly as exciting. And we've talked about the shortcomings of the college football playoffs as a result as well. So there's not a lot of comparison when it comes to the playoffs that you see in the NHL compared to other leagues. Now, as far as my pick here, because I did say I'll make a pick, and I don't really know, right? I've talked about the level of parity. I've talked about some of these teams are just incredible right now. But if I had to take a team, I had to, right? I would pick the Carolina Hurricanes from the eastern half of the NBA, from the Eastern Conference. They've got a tough road right now, right? They have to go through Boston, which they're not. I believe they're tied right now at the time of recording. But then they also have to deal with the winner of this New York Rangers-Pittsburgh series. Hopefully, it's Pittsburgh. New York has been there for a while, right? Pittsburgh, they have Sidney Crosby as their lead guy. Alex Ovechkin is in he's an 8 seed right now against the Florida Panthers. So whoever comes out of the East, it's a stacked half right now. right? There's a lot of really good teams out there right now in the East. So whoever comes out of the East, I think will win the Stanley Cup this year. You got the two-time reigning champions in the form of the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. So there's just so much talent on display in the East. So I don't really know that the West is going to even stand a chance when they do get to the finals and face off with whoever the East has on display, whether it's your President's Trophy winner in the form of the Florida Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes, or whoever else. There's a lot of really good teams in the East right now that I don't see any comparison compared to the other side in the Western Conference. And although it's a gauntlet, I think ultimately the East team they'll be better off going through all of those, all of the strife and the troubles that come with playing that Eastern schedule right now. But like I said, in my perfect world, I would go with the Carolina Hurricanes to win the Stanley Cup championship this year, the Stanley Cup trophy this year. And that'll do it for today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed what you heard today. Of course, I loved seeing what Joey Logano did this past Sunday. I thought it was warranted, and sorry, William Byron, you'll get him next time, right? And I love Tyler Reddick this Sunday at Kansas. I'm not a big fan of Mike Leach comparing horses to the college football playoff, right? I don't think that there's a really good comparison there. And in fact, it's kind of ridiculous, in my opinion, because ultimately speaking, to see a fluke situation unfold is not good justification to say that, oh, Western Kentucky or Vanderbilt or Mississippi State should make the playoff just because they're on the fringe, ultimately. And lastly, we are in the middle of the greatest time of the year, the NHL playoffs. So I hope you enjoy the playoffs. I hope you enjoy all the games over the next few days, over the next week. I hope you enjoy the race at Kansas on Sunday. Trust me, we're going to have a lot to say next week as we have 2 more episodes left in season 2 on May 18th and May 25th. So hopefully you'll choose to join us for both of those. I hope you have a great week. Just know that we will catch y'all next week, and I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you allowing us the opportunity to talk some ball with you.